Hi, friends. I'm Bailey. Welcome to my corner of the internet. Hope you're all doing well today. Please take a moment, subscribe, and let me know where you're coming in from. Thank you all so much for all the love and support. I'm going to tell you today's story to the best of my ability, taking very public information and filtering it through my own unprofessional opinion. Please do your own research and form your own opinion. As uncomfortable as it is for us to talk about these things, imagine how difficult it is for everyone affected. We owe it to them to acknowledge their unbearable experiences, learn something from it, and raise awareness. Todd Christopher Samsell was born on March 7th, 1971, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, to his parents, military veteran William Samsell and Regina Ann Tig. I think that's how you say her last name. Now, Regina went by Reggie, and she started out her career in dental school, but she soon decided to join the Peace Corps, where she served in Chile, South America. She returned to the U.S. and enrolled in court reporting, where she received high honors. After working for several years with fellow court reporters, she decided she wanted to work for herself, and she did so as a CVR for 31 years. Reggie was known as a loving person who was quick with a joke or a smile. She was an animal lover. She had rescued many dogs and cats throughout her life. Now, the marriage between the two was very rocky. It was pretty unhealthy. And in 1973, after just 4 years of marriage, they divorced when Todd was just 2 years old. Now, Regina went on and she married shortly after. And at age 5, Todd took the last name Colehep. It was because of his stepfather, Carl, who adopted him into the family with two stepchildren. Now, his mom sent him to live with his grandparents, and Todd said that as young as 5 years old, his grandfather would shock him with a cattle prod. His mother said she believed her son's problems might be because he never knew his father. At the age of 9, when he started undergoing counseling, Todd was described as being explosive and preoccupied with S content. He also displayed cruelty to animals by hurting a dog with a BB weapon and killing a goldfish using Clorox bleach because he wanted a gerbil. He just poured the bleach right into there. When his mom asked why, he just said he didn't want him anymore. He wanted a gerbil. Now, Todd spent 3.5 months inpatient at Georgia's psychiatric hospital because of his inability to get along with other children. Later, psychological reports found that Todd had an unhealthy relationship with his stepfather and often wanted to live with his father, whom he had not seen in like 8 years. Now, his mom had said in an interview that she had to do everything she could. She just had to get rid of the anger, and nothing she did seemed to help. He would just throw sand when he was in school, and if he wanted something, he would push the kids down and go and get it. She also talks about a time where he had used scissors on a school bus to get back at a girl who had made him mad. He stabbed her in the leg. It wasn't that deep. It didn't do a whole lot of harm, but it's quite alarming. At some point, he goes to live with his biological father, probably around age 10. When Todd returned to his mom in South Carolina, he demanded to be sent back to Arizona. He threatened to off himself or her if he was not allowed to go back. In 1983, when he was just 12 years old, now he's back at home with his mom and his stepdad. He's expressing this desire to go back home to his dad's, but his mom says, you know what? It's not the time right now. Like, we're not going to do that. Look, we just bought you this whole new bedroom set and we've redone your room. And like, let's just calm down and, just chill. Now, Todd is not happy about this. So he goes and grabs a hammer and starts tearing everything up. bit by bit. He just starts smashing everything. He's punching holes in the walls. He's like tearing apart his clothing. And then she even said to a reporter that he actually admitted to trying to harm her if he didn't go back. She was afraid because he was tall enough and he was big enough, and she did what she thought was best. And so she would lock him in his room every night. And then she would lock herself into her room every night. So that way there was an extra sense of protection. Later in 1983, he was sent back to his father in Arizona after his mother and father separated. Now, he began working several local jobs and even took the name Todd Samsel, which was his birth name by his biological dad. It seemed like he worked as a dishwasher and a busboy at his father's restaurant, Billy's, famous for ribs. He also did some landscaping and he also worked at Burger King. Now, he did inherit his father's hobby of collecting weapons, and he was taught by his dad to blow some stuff up. The relationship started off well, but it quickly deteriorated because Todd said that his father was always absent, always out with his girlfriends, and he repeatedly then expressed to go back and live with his mom. However, she reportedly kept making excuses to extend his stay at his dad's. Now, his dad did come out and say that the only emotion that his son was capable of was anger. Todd's mom said she gave in, let him spend the school year there with his dad, and things went south. His dad left him alone for 3 days. And she said, "You can't do that with Todd." On November 25th, 1986, 15-year-old Todd was living with his dad. He decided to target a 14-year-old neighbor of his. She was babysitting her siblings and studying for a chemistry test. She hears the doorbell ring. So she goes to the door and Todd's just standing there. And she knows Todd from the neighborhood, and he tells her that there's a boy that she really likes and has a crush on, and that he's just hanging out around the corner and he wants to talk to her. Uh, she says, "I can't. My siblings are in bed. I'm babysitting. I'm studying. I can't just leave the house." So she's like, "You know what? Sorry, it's just not a good time. Have a good night." And she closes the door. So she goes back to studying, and a few minutes later, the doorbell rings again. So she gets up and she goes, and Todd's there again. He says, "Look, come on. It's just for a minute. It's going to be really fast. Just come on. Just do it. Hurry, please. It's by the time we are standing here arguing about it, we could have already been back by now. Like, come on." So she's like, "You know what? The kids are already in bed. Like, it's fine. It'll be quick. Okay. So if I do this, he'll stop ringing the doorbell. I can go on about life and all will be well with the world." So she's like, "Okay, hold on. Let me get some shoes on." And she goes outside. Now he walks with her to a nearby alley where she thinks that she's meeting up with this kid that she has a crush on. Todd pulls out a weapon and tells her he's going to hurt her if she doesn't listen to him. Now she tries to wrestle it away from him and she actually does get a hold of the barrel. Todd calls her bluff and decides to pull the trigger. Thankfully, it misfires. That's awkward. So she decides that she has no choice right now but to comply. So she follows his directions and he leads her back to his house. When they get to his house, he winds up assaulting her. I believe that he had tied her up, um, but somehow, some way, while this is happening, back at her house, her brother either wakes up or realizes she's gone and he just doesn't feel right. So he calls his parents and says, "Hey, she left." And he winds up calling the police. From Todd's bedroom, they could see that the lights from the police cars are. Todd jumps up and he's panicking. He's like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. Like, now you know this is happening. What do I do with you?" And she's like, "Hey, okay, Todd, it's okay. We can tell everybody that I was just helping you try to find your dog. And it's going to be okay. I'm not going to tell anybody. Just if I don't go home, there's going to be problems. But as long as I go home, they'll just think that I went out helping you look for a dog." So he finally agrees and he lets her go. Goes back to her house, but before she left, he said, "Hey, if you tell anybody, I'm going to hurt you and your family." When she walks into her house, there's police officers and her parents are already home. So she starts telling everybody about the story about how she went to go help him look for this dog. Now she's sitting there shaking and trembling, and her dad can definitely tell that something's going on. And he's begging her just to be honest. Just tell us what's happening. So she winds up breaking down and she tells them everything. So the police walk over to Todd's house and they knock on the door. He opens it holding a shot G and says, "Now, how much time am I going to get for this?" He's only 15 years old. He's arrested and charged with assault, kidnapping, and committing a dangerous crime against a child. He takes a plea. Now, during this time, he saw a psychiatrist and he was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. It was all noted by his doctor that he was very intelligent, but behaviorally and emotionally, he is dangerous. His doctor, lawyer, and the probation officer did not think that he could be rehabilitated. They all felt like he had the personality that was dangerous in terms of him feeling like society owed him something. Almost as if he did something, it was because he was justified, because he felt like he was wronged. He ended up serving his full sentence of 15 years and he was released in August of 2001. He returned to South Carolina and he was placed on their S offender list as a tier 3 offender, which is the most severe category. At this time, he's about 30 years old and he said he was determined to turn his life around. He landed a job as a graphic designer, allowing him to explore his passions for G's and motorcycles. His interest in flying also took off and he proudly earned his pilot's license. Around this time, Todd was living at a Hunt Around this time, Todd was living at the Hunt Club Apartments, and someone found out that he was a registered offender. So they actually started printing off these papers. They actually started printing off the um papers with his photo and with the charges on it, and they started putting them all over the place, on the cars, in the parking lot, all over the apartments. Now he felt like he was being harassed, so he went to the police. They said that there was nothing that they could do. In 2003, Todd dreamed of becoming a successful real estate businessman, focusing on buying and selling homes. He needed a license to make that dream a reality, and he wrote to the South Carolina Real Estate Commission. And in his letter, Todd opened up about some past mistakes, including a challenging experience from his teenage years that led to a lengthy stay in prison, describing it as a youthful misunderstanding during an argument with his girlfriend. At just 15, he found himself in a difficult situation, and while he did have a weapon for protection, he made it clear that he never intended to use it. They felt like, you know what, he's coming clean and he's putting everything out there, so he's just trying to be honest. And so it seems like he's going to be trustworthy. Let's go ahead and give him his license. Now, he said in the first 5 months of having his license, he made an insane amount of money. He just decided to stick with it. In May 2014, he moved to a beautiful home and bought a 95-acre property. The woman who sold her house to him said that Todd was very outgoing. He came off quite professional, but there were times that it was just uncomfortable. He would often talk about how he had many weapons, and he would often try to slip inappropriate S jokes in there as well. Some of his neighbors noted his love for firearms, often hearing the sound of gunshots in the evenings. Todd eventually started his real estate company, TK, TKA. By 2015, he became a well known figure in the Spartanburg, Anderson, and Woodruff areas of South Carolina. Now, there seemed to be a lot of mixed emotions about Todd depending on who you talk to. Some people who worked for him said he had an explosive personality, and others saw him as a mentor who taught them how to be successful in their careers. There were even some clients who said that they just saw some red flags, like a lot of them. He would get angry about just the little things, like if they're doing an inspection in a house and he disagreed with something, he would get so mad. One client said he would also try to fit in conversations about how he had a large collection of weapons. So she felt so uncomfortable that she wound up Googling him. When she Googled him, his past conviction popped up, and so she calls the police and says, "Hey, this guy's over here talking about how he's got all these weapons, but I just found out that he has a conviction. And I don't think he's supposed to have weapons like that." Unfortunately, they tell her that there's nothing that they can do about it unless she's actually seen the weapons. Now let's go back in time. On November 6th, 2003, off Interstate 85 in Chesney, South Carolina, four people were shot inside Super Bike Motorsports. The owner's name was Scott Ponder. He was 30 years old. The service manager was Brian Lucas. He was also 30. The third victim was mechanic Chris Schubert, who was 26. And then the last was the bookkeeper Beverly, who was 52 years old. Beverly was Scott's mother, and Scott was married to his soulmate Melissa. Melissa describes the way that they met. She was sent to Indianapolis one weekend for a motorcycle convention. She ran into Scott and she could hear his southern accent. It was a little hard for her to understand, but she thought he was adorable and they became good friends from the moment that they met. She knew from then she wanted to marry him. He gave her a beautiful ring and they dreamed about having 6 babies and even having a motorcycle border around the nursery. They married in January 2001 and were very much in love. They discovered that Melissa was pregnant and went to the first ultrasound on Tuesday, November 4th, 2003. She said it was an overwhelming experience for them. Sorry, guys. Had to take a moment, throw the hair up. Temperature, weather, set on hell. How's the weather like for you guys where you are? Back to the story. Beverly Guy was married to Scott's stepdad, Terry Guy, for 24 years. Scott was an only child. He and Beverly were very close. Terry describes Beverly as one of the most hardworking women, the most hardworking woman, the most hardworking mom he's ever met. He said that when they initially met, she was working multiple jobs so that she could save up enough money to buy Scott the bike that he had always wanted. He said she was just the mom who would do anything for her family. She really enjoyed spending time with her son, and so when they needed a bookkeeper, Scott and Melissa was like, "Oh my gosh, this would be perfect for your mom." Beverly was also so excited to be a grandma. On the day of the killing, she wasn't even supposed to be at the shop. She just agreed to go down there to grab money to go to the bank and deposit it. Her husband said now he tries to see the positive in any situation because that's what Beverly used to do. And he sees it as Beverly was there for a reason, because if something would have happened to Scott and not her, she wouldn't know how to go on without him. Brian Lucas was the service manager. His parents said that he was a fun loving, energetic, and a happy person. He was also a very helpful human being. Brian was also considerate and independent. It was his dad who actually bought him his first bike, and from that moment forward, he was hooked. It was very difficult to get him off of it. And anytime you saw him out playing, it was with his bike, whether he was riding it or fixing it. He was always doing something. And he was married to the love of his life, and she fell in love with his personality, smile, and his great heart, because he was the type of guy who would just give the shirt off of his back to a stranger. Chris Schubert, or Shuby as everyone called him, was a good friend of Scott's. Growing up, he was raised by his aunt. He even went on to live with her when he was about 5 years old, and she said he was the sweetest, greatest kid. Like his coworkers, he was addicted to all things bike. He loved racing them, and he loved banana pudding. And he would even pay someone to make him banana pudding every Sunday. Sadly, Scott never got to meet his son because he was killed just 2 days after the ultrasound appointment. The last time Melissa saw Scott was that morning when she usually woke up before him to go to work. At the time, she worked for the Chamber of Commerce, but she was experiencing heavy morning sickness. Before leaving, she passed by the motorcycle dealership, honked, and Scott blew her a kiss and waved as she drove by. They had a conversation around 2 o'clock, and she told him that she would probably head that way in about the next hour or so. While driving to the dealership, she encountered a roadblock and saw a scene filled with law enforcement. Realizing something had happened, she got out of her car and she ran past 10 police officers, insisting that she needed to get to her husband's business. Finally, an officer was able to get her, and they couldn't provide much information. Instead, they were ordered to take her home, take her phone, make sure she didn't turn on the TV, make sure she didn't turn on a radio, and just hold her there until they had more information. They didn't want her to receive any information about any of this until they had more information. And Melissa spent about 2 hours. She was just staring out the front door and just waiting for somebody to come and tell her what is happening, what's going on. Eventually, she saw the Spartanburg County coroner drive up the driveway. Immediately, it didn't hit her that they were actually there, like, for her to tell her something. But the coroner came in, knocked on the door, and was like, "Hey, we need to come in and have a chat." They said, "Okay, Melissa, you need to sit down. We have something to tell you." So they told her, "Hey, your husband, Scott, has been shot." And then they went on to tell her that Scott's mother was there and that she too had been killed. Also, Brian had been killed as well, and that they were still trying to identify the fourth victim. Chris's family specifically had a really hard time dealing with his death because they didn't even know that he had passed away until they read it in the paper. They were just devastated. No one ever reached out to them to identify him or tell him that this has happened. Nothing. Now, Todd was a frequent visitor of the shop. He was well known, and it seemed like they liked him. He bought a bike from them, and then he had gone back to the shop and said, "Hey, I feel like I made a mistake. I'm not that experienced, and I don't know if this is a good idea." It seems like they might have all been kind of joking around with him, saying that he couldn't ride this bike, and because of this, he seemed to get really angry. He left the shop, and then about a week or so passed, and then the bike was stolen right outside of his apartment. He had only had it for about 2 weeks before it was stolen. Can you imagine insurance being like, "Come on now"? According to Todd, he received a payout from his insurance company for the stolen motorcycle and he returned back to Superbike Motorsports to purchase another bike. Odd. The manager, Brian Lucas, commented to him and made him believe that the Superbike Motorsports was responsible for the theft of the motorcycle. Todd said he went back to the shop after this and a customer had walked in to put money on his son's go kart account. Todd said that he didn't want this man involved in any way, so he waited until the man left. This man pays, chats a little bit, and heads home. So Todd tells Scott, "Hey, I'm ready to buy this bike." So Chris walks toward the back of the store and Todd follows behind Chris. When they get to the back of the store, Todd pulls out his weapon and Chris becomes his first victim. Todd said that the other three must have heard the shots and they ran to the back to see what was going on. Beverly was the first to run into Todd. And he said he didn't want to hurt a woman, but she left him no choice. So she was the second victim. At this point, Brian and Scott see what's going on and they try to make a run for it. They're trying to make a beeline toward the doors. But before they can even make it out, he gets Brian. And then Scott was just past the door, barely into the parking lot, and he was the final victim that day. Todd states, "It's not my best work," and then went on and shot each victim in the forehead. Now, that was one thing that the police never released to the media. He then put the weapon on safety, because, safety first. Todd said it felt like a video game. He was very engaged and very focused. His interviews are online, and it's really weird and creepy. The go kart man gets home and he sees breaking news come across the TV. And he calls the police and he said, "Hey, y'all, I was just there. I left about 3. And when I was there, everybody was alive. It's only been like 20 minutes. Nothing seems suspicious, but there was another customer in there." And he said that this customer seemed like he was just browsing around the store, chatting with Scott. The investigators say, "Hey, can you come in for a composite sketch?" Now, a sketch of a possible witness emerged along with descriptions of a truck and a car spotted in the area. Authorities asked for the public's help in identifying an individual described as a white man aged 25 to 35, weighing 175 to 200 pounds, with dark brown hair and possibly a mustache, wearing a black leather jacket and blue jeans. The detectives say that they followed up with past customers, but they only looked at customers who had bought a bike within the last 30 days. And Todd's purchase was several months before that. The murders go unsolved for 10 years. It's going to be the disappearance of a couple that went missing on August 31st, 2016, that finally got investigators looking at Todd. Now, Charlie Carver was 32, and he also grew up in South Carolina. He came from a good family and had a kind heart. He was a great guy, always smiling and dedicated to helping others. His dad describes him as funny, entertaining, and he loved making people smile. Charlie and his sister were about 8 years apart and were the best of friends. They played video games, made stories, and watched movies. His sister says that they didn't have a lot when they were growing up. So on Friday nights, after all the chores were done, they got to sit down and watch a movie. They discovered Gene Wilder, who was a larger than life person. Charlie looked up to him. Every Thursday, Charlie would post something like a dad joke or a knock knock joke on his social media because he didn't want anyone to have a bad day. When Gene Wilder passed away, his family knew that Charlie would want to know. Charlie meets this girl named Nikki. They get married, and Charlie tells his sister that Nikki wanted to have an open relationship. Eventually, Charlie separated from his wife. Now, Charlie and this girl named Kayla met each other through Kayla's mother. Kayla was dating someone else at the time, but her and Charlie had been friends for about a year before they started dating. Charlie felt an emotional connection to Kayla because she was going through a rough patch and he wanted to be there to help her. In 2016, 30-year-old Kayla Brown was in the prime of her life. She worked at a dialysis clinic and occasionally made extra money by cleaning houses for a local real estate agent. She was described as a bubbly and upbeat person. She and Charlie were very much in love, and they wound up moving in together. In September 2016, when Charlie's mother, Joanne, hadn't heard from him for a few days, she called Charlie's father, Chuck, to see if he had seen their son. On Saturday, September 3rd, Joanne asked, "Have you talked to Charlie?" And Chuck replied, "No, I haven't." Now she started getting concerned because it was unusual for him to go this long without responding to her text messages. Joanne contacted the apartment manager where Charlie and Kayla lived, asking her to check on their son. When no one came to the door, the apartment manager let herself inside. She found Kayla's dog Romeo left without food or water, and it seemed like it was for several days. It seemed like no one had been in the apartment for a while. Realizing something was probably wrong, Charlie's mother filed a missing persons report. 2 days later, Fred arrives at the Anderson PD to report Kayla missing. The police first thought that they probably left together and didn't want to tell anyone where they were going. Joanne pleads with the police that her son wouldn't just get up and leave without telling her, but there's nothing that law enforcement can do. Joanne's report noted that Charlie and Kayla were supposed to meet someone regarding a job opportunity. They had set off on August 31st to help Todd, a property owner in Woodruff, clean up the area. So parents decide that they're going to go out and they're going to search on their own. They drive down every road that they could think of, seeing if maybe they had gotten into a car accident or stranded somewhere, but they didn't come up with anything. And then 10 days after they go missing, Charlie starts posting on Facebook. He's saying he's married and that he's expecting a baby. His family's like, "Dude, you're not even legally divorced yet. You can't get married." So, after a lot of these random weird posts, his family starts believing that someone is taking control of his account and posting acting like they are him. So, his parents go back to the police department and they're like, "Hey, somebody's posting on his account. This is not Charlie." The police interrogated Nikki, his soon to be ex wife, but she didn't help that much. Investigators' notes show that Nicole gave them several stories, including that Kayla and Charlie had called her and that they were going to Florida. Then she turns around and says that the car was at the airport and then even in her garage. And these leads weren't true. The strange comments that came pouring out of Nicole Carver's mouth were so weird. She was asking people for money pretending to be Charlie. Now, they traced that IP address back to where those Facebook posts were coming from, and that was from Nicole Carver's home. On August 31st, Charlie's estranged wife, Nicole, posted a very cryptic message on Facebook that said, "My beloved husband, RIP." Nicole's post on Facebook was concerning. Charlie had told his parents that since their separation, Nicole had been stalking him and Kayla. One time he came home from work and found her sitting outside of his apartment. Once Nicole learned about this relationship with Kayla, she wasn't ready to let go of their marriage. Nicole sent text messages to Charlie's mother saying, "Your son never wants to see you again." Now, a month passes, and there's still no sign of Kayla or Charlie, and their families fear the worst. Kayla and Charlie's mom go on TV in October to discuss the case. Now, an AT&T representative gets a phone call from the lead investigator on the case, trying to get where the last pings were at on Charlie's phone. But the AT&T operator gets suspicious. The person that's calling isn't spelling the detective's name correctly. They have no badge number. So the operator puts the person on hold and they call the police department. The police confirmed that that was not the detective who had been investigating Charlie's disappearance. 3 days later, Nicole is arrested for impersonating a police officer. However, authorities do not find any evidence connecting Nicole to Charlie and Kayla's disappearance. She bonds out of jail and just sits there and waits for it to play out. The last time Charlie was seen was on video surveillance on Tuesday before they went missing at approximately 7 p.m. as he was leaving for work. Then there was no activity on things like credit cards or their cell phones. Police submit search warrants to their cell phones, hoping to track their location. Unfortunately, phone companies can take as long as 6 or 8 weeks before you can get those records back. When they get those records back, GPS pings their last cell phone location. And detectives are led to Todd's property and they get a search warrant. On November 3rd, the sheriff's department dispatched a team of investigators to a wooded area off of Wilford Road in Woodruff, South Carolina. Charlie and Kayla's phones had pinged off of the tower, indicating that they were probably or near the 96-acre property farm. Most of the property was surrounded by a large fence. A gravel drive snaked through the property and led to a wooded area. As the police walked through the woods, they discovered Charlie's car hidden in a ravine. The vehicle was covered in brush and had appeared to be altered. Now, his car was originally brown, but it had been painted white. After locating the car, investigators made their way up the gravel road toward a building with an apartment above it. Several structures were on the property, including a gardening shed for supplies and a workshop garage. The investigators found a metal container secured with multiple locks. They attempted to remove the locks, and when that failed, they used a sledgehammer to break it open. Now, they could hear what sounded like fists or feet pounding against the sides from inside the container. One of the detectives knocked on the container, and they heard a woman screaming over and over and over again. After over an hour of using a saw and bolt cutters, they finally managed to get the doors open. Once inside, 2 or 3 investigators entered the container and they found Kayla at the back of it with a padlock chain around her neck that had to be cut off with bolt cutters. This setup was reminiscent of something meant to restrain an enslaved person or a dog. Kayla then told investigators that Todd had shot Charlie 3 times in the chest, wrapped him up in a blue tarp, and placed him in the bucket of a tractor. She never saw him again. She says on August 31st, her and Charlie was at Todd's property and agreed to do a cleaning job. He had given them some clippers and some water, pointed them towards some area that needed cleaning, and left. Everything seemed fine, but then Todd reappears, and this time he had a G. Before anybody can do anything and react, he shoots Charlie 3 times in the chest, grabbed Kayla from behind, and put her inside the big metal container. He binds her ankles and her hands, and he puts a gag in her mouth. Kayla watches as Todd rolls Charlie's body up in a tarp, and Kayla is kept in this container, chained and AR'd daily. Todd showed up with food and water for her occasionally. He would let her out. He would walk her around the property on the chain and collar ish. He likes to show her the grave where he buried Charlie, and he tells her that if she tries to run away, she could wind up there. Now, Todd tells her she's beautiful and he chose her. One day, Stockholm Syndrome will kick in and she'll be happy that she's there. Investigators asked Kayla why she believed she was left alive. She thinks that Todd had it out for Charlie and that Todd had an infatuation with her. She was repeatedly assaulted and believed that Todd just wanted to keep her for himself. Todd said that she was never intended to be an SLAV, and he believed that he had proof that Kayla was a willing participant in any activities that happened between them. Now, he would provide the things that investigators needed to prove that she was willing and compliant in this. The locked in a metal container and all. He provided her all of the things that she needed: food, water, notepads, books, and adult toys. Now, she wrote notes in the notebook, and she refers to him as a kidnapper with a conscience and one who has morals. He said he was just building up her trust, and she would want to stay with him, and she would eventually be able to roam free on the property. Kayla says she's traumatized. She just saw Charlie get hurt, and she's like, I'm just doing what I can to survive. She knows what he is capable of, and she knows she could be next. She just complies. Now, that does not mean consent. After Kayla went into the ambulance, a massive search was underway to find Charlie Carver. Federal, state, and local agencies all came to assist. In the process, they found many weapons. Eventually, Charlie Carver was found and identified. Detectives discovered a freshly dug hole in the ground next to Charlie's grave. One of the investigators said, "I looked at her grave. I looked at a hole in the ground. It could have been hers." When the police tell Todd that they found Charlie's body, he decides to come clean. He was mad at Kayla, so he killed Charlie. He then goes on to tell police that there are more bodies on his property. He said that about a year before, he had two people that tried to rob him. The police take Todd back to his property in Woodruff. Without hesitation, Todd leads them to the place where he buried two other people. The two victims were so badly decomposed that they had to end up relying on tattoos to identify them. The coroner ends up identifying the bodies as Johnny and Megan Coxey. Megan was 25 and her husband Johnny was 29. Johnny was the son of Cindy Coxey. Growing up, his mom said he was very adventurous and he loved dirt bikes. He'd do donuts in the yard and she'd be screaming out the front door like, "Don't tear up the yard. Come on now." Megan's mom said that she was a typical happy girl and she was very friendly. She had a little sister who looked up to her and loved any opportunity she could just to hang out with her big sister. When Megan was 17, she had had a baby, a boy, and 2 years after that, she met Johnny. They were inseparable and ended up having a son together. They both liked art and being creative. December 2015, Megan was a waitress at Waffle House. Megan meets Todd and he tells her that he has an opportunity for her to make more money. She said, "Okay, well, can my husband come too?" Todd says, "Sure." So he invites them both to come to the property. Now, before they go to the property, Megan actually was arrested the Saturday before, which was just 2 days before. She calls her mom and she's like, "Please, mom, just get me out of here." Mom's like, "No, you know what? I've had enough. You need to pay your debt. Like, I'm done." So they go back and forth a little bit, and finally her mom decides to bail her out of jail. So Megan and Johnny, they go to Todd's property. Now, Todd's version of the story is that while they were there, Johnny tries to steal from him by pulling out a knife, and Todd said he instinctively responded by grabbing his weapon that he was carrying and shot him. He said Megan is like, WTF, and he takes her and puts her in the shipping container, the same one that was found earlier. He said that he just needed some time to figure out what he wanted to do with her. He said he came up with a few scenarios, and one of them was going to be to offer her $4,000 to take her up to Tennessee and let her go. He holds her there for about a week, and finally Megan agrees to this, but he finally decides, you know what? I'm not ready yet. I don't think we're going to do this. Todd is thinking, she knows who I am. She has seen what I've done. She knows my place. I just cannot risk this. So it seems that Megan kept trying to get out multiple times. It seemed like she was a little bit of a handful. Seemed like she was a little bit of a fighter, from what Todd was saying. So one time she was trying to get out and she struggled with him. He Megan in the head, and she's buried next to Johnny on the property. Now, Johnny and Megan, they had been missing since December 22nd, 2015. Their parents filed a missing persons report on them. Megan's mom even begged for them to just go check the last time her phone was pinged, and she would go and look for herself. And they said, you know what? We can't do that. It's an invasion of their property. And if they want to be adults and just up and leave, then they have every right to do so. Now, Todd's mom has given several interviews throughout her life, and she said Todd's not a monster, claiming that the four victims in the bike shop had bullied her son. He's not even close to it. He wasn't doing it for enjoyment. He was doing it because he was mad and he was hurt. Now, she did ask her son why did he do it, and he told her that they had embarrassed him and made him feel bad when he visited the shop, that he just didn't know how to ride the bike and they made him feel embarrassed about it. He said that he killed Charlie because he had a smart mouth and he didn't like it. His mom also says that she had no clue of what he was capable of until he confessed. Now, 70-year-old Regina Ann Teague was found by her husband inside their home on April 23rd, 2017, after a long illness of heart disease and COPD. She died of natural causes. On May 26, 2017, Todd pleaded guilty to 12 charges, including 7 counts of M, 2 counts of kidnapping, and 1 count of criminal SA. He was sentenced to 7 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole, and that was worked out in a plea bargain to take the DP off the table. At his sentencing, his attorneys promised that there were no additional victims. However, People magazine had received a tip that may prove otherwise. In an email, they say November 9th, 1986, a full-time 23-year-old college student at Arizona State was essayed. It was a Saturday night, and she had woken up to someone standing over her. He duct taped her mouth and pushed her head back on the bed. He quickly flipped her over and tied her hands behind her back, and she said she just remembers feeling terrified and thinking, please God, don't kill me. He whispered, do you like it? She said it was awkward, like he didn't know what he was doing. And then all of a sudden he got up, said, don't call the police. And after about 5 minutes, she got up and went to the hospital. The exam showed that there was no sperm, and because of the abrasions, they thought maybe he used a sedum. She says the police never reached out to her after taking the report. That was on November 9th, 1986. 16 days later was when that 14-year-old was AR'd. Todd lived on South Gary Street. His 14-year-old victim lived close to him around next door, and the other victim that had reached out, she lived just a few blocks away. Now, remember when Todd was complaining about how people were hassling him when he was living at the apartments and they put out all the flyers and he went to the police and they wouldn't do anything about it? Well, per his reports, he says that one day he was in the parking lot and he was approached by two guys that he didn't like. He said that the guys were putting flyers all over the place, and supposedly one day they pulled a knife on him, and just because of everything that had been going on, he just snapped. When asked about them, Todd says they're no longer with us. The only information that he would give was that they were buried in a wooden area nearby, but he says he couldn't remember where it was. He gave a vague description of where he thought he remembered it being, and investigators did go and dig up the area, but they didn't find anything. Todd also was a very interesting character. He decided he was going to leave some Amazon reviews. One of them was about a padlock. He said, "Solid lock. Have 5 on a shipping container. Won't stop them, but it sure will slow them down till they're too old to care." Another one he wrote about a folding shovel. He says, "Good for keeping in your car when you had to hide bodies and you left the full-size shovel at home." Now, throughout all this and all of his mental evals, they had come to determine that Todd had actually had an above IQ of 118. Now, Charlie's family was the last to get on board with this plea agreement. They said that they had had a hard time with this and that they felt like he deserved the DP. Scott's son will never get to meet his dad. He seems like he's a well-spoken, kind-hearted young man. His dad would be so proud of him. He said he didn't want the DP. And that would speak volumes since he lost his dad before he even got to meet him. What do you think? Do you think that there's more victims? Do you think that he could just be lying about the whole thing? Um, I think that it is rare for people like Todd to go long with time in between. So I would expect that he probably did snatch up at least one person with that whole flyer incident because that would go with his idea that society was doing him wrong, so he had to retaliate. It just really sucks that none of the police took them seriously for the missing persons flyers. I don't think it would have changed the result, but they could have maybe found Kayla quicker. And that poor girl, she went and testified or gave a victim impact statement. So I believe she had to face him, and she is one tough cookie. All right, you guys, that's it for me today. Thank you all so much for hanging there with me. I've lost an earring. I am hot as all get out. It's just been a day. So, if you've made it this far, I appreciate you and I love you all so so much. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means so much to me. Let me know your thoughts below. Do you think he should have gotten the DP? We must avoid looking the other way and saying it isn't my business. We need to step up together because it is our business.